Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to go ahead and jump in with a couple of quick intros from myself and Jim, who will be leading you through this webinar today. I'm Shannon Ogborn. I am our community lead here at Ashby, so I work on our Ashby podcast, as well as other community events like webinars. I have a recruiting background myself and actually crossed over with Jim at Google, so really excited to be with you all here today.
Hi, Shannon. This is my year-end planning gnome, so he's making a special appearance for this today. I'm Jim. I lead the people and talent function here at Ashby. I used to be an Ashby customer. I was at Google for 15 years, and it's very exciting to be talking about year-end planning. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to figuring out how the world has changed and how that's going to impact how we plan for next year.
100%. And as I was saying, I'm the community lead here, and one of the most amazing parts of my role is getting to connect with recruiting teams and leaders every single day. And I've been hearing a lot of chatter and questions about how planning for the upcoming year may be a little bit different from years prior. So what we've decided to do here is spend a couple of minutes rehashing our hiring excellence framework that we really believe is the right foundation for your recruiting function, which we can send some info on that afterwards. And then we're going to walk through some of the key steps to be thinking about on how we can achieve financial alignment and strategic input up front, how we set up capacity planning and resourcing, and how you can run a confirm and communicate strategy so that you are set up properly the right way to hit the ground running in 2024.
So I'm not good enough at getting off mute. So understanding this rapidly evolving environment, we went back to first principles to really evaluate the what and how that were driving top TA teams. And we mapped and organized the success and experience into 4 competencies. Strategy and planning. Are we actively planning headcount, setting targets, defining success? So we'll spend a lot of time here today. Candidate attraction. Do we have access to the best talent for the jobs your business needs? And there's a little element of that later on in this call. Candidate evaluation. Are we assessing candidates effectively enough to accurately make the right hire? Again, we'll touch on that. And then stakeholder engagement. Is recruiting bringing the business along? And that's a key part of what we're talking about here. Naturally, all of this is easier said than done. As we dug deeper into how top teams were actually unlocking the success across these competencies, we realized that excellence isn't just the work you do, Hiring excellence is your cultural mindset, the mindset your company has around recruiting. And the competencies represent the what, these three strategic pillars that extend across all four of the competencies. That's really the how. Improvement, operational efficiency, and organizational agility. These are the three strategic pillars, and they're how the top teams really excelled in the four core competencies.
So what we want to be really clear about is you don't have to be amazing at everything, right? The framework has really been designed to enable you to pick out what's critical for you, depending on how you plan to grow. Or in some cases, right now with the current environment, we know that some companies are actually scaling back or just kind of trying to maintain steady. So as we chat more through the checklist, just be thinking about your cohort, and that will help you determine what bits of the checklist are most relevant for your team right now. No one company is the same, and each has unique objectives, but our research has found that teams generally align to one of 5 growth cohorts.
So those cohorts, cohort 1, hypergrowth, the goal of doubling or more your total company size over a certain period, 12 months perhaps. Cohort 2, a fiscally conservative steady growth, milestone-based hiring with some occasional opportunistic hiring. We're seeing a lot more of that now. Cohort 3, low incremental headcount growth, but with plans to scale. So short-term incremental headcount, super conservative, but the business is anticipating an event, fundraising, a product launch that's going to be the catalyst for potentially hypergrowth in the future. Cohort 4, consolidation and maintenance of team size. Stable, low velocity hiring, backfilling some roles, managing internal mobility, and maintaining the overall team efficiencies. And then finally, cohort 5, reduction of team size, either making large cuts at specific moments of time, including freezing all headcount and relying on natural attrition, or strategic ongoing cuts in the reorganization of teams.
Jim, I'm curious if you can maybe give an illustrative example of an organization you've been in at the past and how that's resonated maybe with these growth cohorts.
Definitely. I mean, I spent a long time in the hypergrowth mode at Google, but we saw the ups and downs there. And then at Full Story, when I first joined, we went from 200 to over 600 in about 15 months. And then we went into a different mode, and I'll use it as an example later of trying to be super conservative and to consolidate on what we've done.
Amazing. So frameworks are, of course, great, but conceptualizing how to apply these frameworks to your organization can, in my opinion, feel a little bit daunting. So we are going to start exploring a checklist of how you can start the planning journey more strategically and without overwhelm. So today we're going to be walking through 3 main stages to consider when moving into this planning. So the first is financial model and strategic input. The second is capacity planning and resourcing alignment. And the third is confirming and communicating your plan. So first things first, talk to me, Jim, a little bit about the critical first step of understanding the budget and headcount plans that are signed off by finance.
So first of all, I think there's a mind shift that we need to go on. Part of that is around everyone being good stewards for the companies we represent these days. And it's a very different mindset to when everybody was in hypergrowth. So we first of all need to understand both the overall headcount, end count, but also the monetary budget that sits with that. How much are they willing to spend? And that's probably modeled on some kind of average salary per head type things, potentially down to the departmental level. I think it's also critical at this point that you then get the plan down to leaders and teams very quickly. They need to get the granular detail into the plan as fast as possible, so then you can drive the feedback loops afterwards. And your role, that stakeholder engagement piece that we talked about from the Hiring Excellence Framework, you've got to get in with the executives. You've got to learn from them how they intend to spend the budget they've been allocated, understand the signals. How does it break it down across the team for each year, of course? But really, what are the motivations? Because you're in one of these seats that sits across the whole business. So you need to pull those views together and consolidate that. Time. We all know that time is a critical element of planning for talent, and headcount. The timelines for headcount planning really does impact recruiting capacity.
What would you say is the impact of delay in getting the headcount plan complete and understood and agreed upon?
Any delays cause you to have to do your hiring in less time. If you have less time to hit the goal, you probably need more resources, or you're going to delay that hiring and delay the company's goals. If you have to put more resources into your teams because of a time crunch, you have to look at what that means for next year. If you're then going to have too many recruiters, we probably get back into layoffs again. We don't want to go there. I think we've all seen examples of where companies have suddenly decided to increase the headcount mid-year, and it has to be done by the end of the year. They've spiked recruiter numbers to meet the need, and then realize that they're just over-resourced for the following year. It's not a situation we want to go in again.
Well, absolutely. And I think next year is going to be, this is my trend prediction, the year of fractional and contract recruiting, because there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows. And I think now organizations are starting to become a little bit more aware of those ebbs and flows and how they can do things in a way that sets their organization up for success, but also sets human beings up for success and proper expectations in their role. So I know this is somewhat dependent on your growth cohort, but what are some of the key questions people should be asking their department leaders about the headcount?
First of all, I'd be looking for spikes and troughs. What can you smooth out? Where can you spread everything out more effectively? Pressure testing those timelines that we talked about before. And then also looking at the order of operations. What are the critical first hires? What do we have to focus on right now? Line managers, enablement type hires. The hires that then lead to the other hires being successful so you don't get diminishing returns. You've got to have those conversations, and that will help you phase the recruiting through the year. And that then helps your capacity. Which roles have cross-functional dependencies? We're talent leaders, and as I said before, we're in a key seat that enables us to sit and overlook all of the silos. We're one of the few roles in a company that has that view across teams. And we have a different lens to how finance sees the business. So if you see that one team has a cross-functional dependency on another, but their hiring plans are out of sync, and Team A relies on Team B's productivity in order to be successful, Team B needs to be prioritized. But the individual leader might not understand that or have connected the dots there. So it's key that you're able to call that, share that information with finance, share it with the executives so that everyone can get aligned.
Definitely. The alignment is a very big key. And so the communication part is big. So now that we have talked to our department head stakeholders, talked to finance, we need to sort of think about how we set up our own recruiting team for success by evaluating our own capacity, the capacity of stakeholders, and if we have the proper resources in place to be successful in our hiring process. So we're really assessing, do we have the resources in place, like you said earlier, Jim, to hit the needs of the business? So thinking about what resources we need in place, what are our timelines between now and when the work starts and peaks to make sure we get the right resources in the right place, and really mapping out all the necessary resources that go into going live. So I'm just going to say this right now. I think we've probably all made this mistake, so maybe I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but do yourself a favor and your team a favor by making sure all of these ducks are in a row before launching your plan. Upfront work may feel overwhelming or like a sort of large burden, but it will pay huge dividends in the long run in your time to hire, time to fill, candidate experience with internal stakeholders. And so there are a couple of key pieces here to ensure the work is done up front. What are those pieces, Jim?
So in the candidate evaluation space, so again, going back to the hiring excellence framework, you've got to figure out the capacity of your interviewers. Remember, businesses have changed dramatically since possibly you were doing your last headcount planning, maybe it's 2-3 years ago. you've got to do your waterfall analytics to understand just how many interviews you're going to need to do across the plan into certain teams and so on. Do you have the interviewer pools and the capacity available to do that hiring? If you don't, you're going to need to boost the interviewer numbers now by hosting interview training to get enough folks up to speed. You've got to be able to fulfill that capacity if you're going to be looked at successfully. And then I think the macro environment is going to have an impact here as well. You're going to hire roles that you've never hired before as a company. It may well be that you don't even have the structured interview materials available yet to do that hiring. So you've got to build out those hiring plans. You've got to make sure you understand who's owning what areas within each hiring plan for you to move forward. Don't get caught out and surprised by something that you're expecting. You've already got the infrastructure to support, and you just don't. The next piece relates back to what I was talking about at the beginning, but the difference between a numerical hiring plan and a financial monetary hiring plan. You've got compensation bands assigned to these roles, right? Have you prepared them? Are you there? You're probably there with the compliance around compensation bands being published externally and so on. But do they align with the monetary budget allocated initially against hiring? Your role is to take that aggregation and to understand it and potentially flag that, hey, we're going to spend more money than we were thinking here. One of the things I'm expecting to see from some companies, again, driven by the macro environment, is a change in hiring practices. They've been quiet for 2 years. That may cause a preference for them to hire senior folks, which cost more. And maybe finance misses this signal. That causes more risk to your business, more cash burn. Again, you're stewards of your business, your key stakeholders here. You need to be making sure that you're communicating these potential risks. And also, you don't want to be stopped from posting a role because you didn't consider comp bands till the last minute. We're legally required to publish those comp bands in many states now. So get that those are one of your ducks to get in order, to use Shannon's phrase. What else? So again, potential impact from the macro environment, approval processes. You've probably got documentation as to who decides who gets hired, but those key decision makers may well have changed. People may not be in the business anymore. There may be a different desire. Finance may want more decision making within the process. So you've got to go and update all of that. You've got to go and do some qualitative research as to what people are expecting to make sure that you don't make hires that the business didn't want to happen. And then I think time is another critical piece. If the stakeholders don't have time to work on these things that you need up front, they should potentially defer hiring for a role and also go deeper into their plan. And perhaps they've got enablement or line manager positions that are in the plan that you can pull forward, which will then enable them to have the bandwidth to do this extra work. So it's key you're looking at this holistically.
Definitely. I have seen it, unfortunately, so many times. I'd be curious for folks who joined if this has happened to them, but there's so many times where hiring managers don't actually have the capacity to hire all the people that they're trying to hire. And so the whole thing gets pushed back, and ultimately it sort of makes recruiting look bad because we haven't filled what we need to, but the capacity may be on the other side. That's the important piece of communication. I'm going to read Jim a question that Annie had in the chat here. In your opinion and experience, how much of education to managers about hiring timing and org structure sits with TA and how much sits with HR business partners? Like, what's the right balance there?
I think it really does depend on the stage, the type of company you are, and so on. But your hiring HR business partners may only look after one department or multiple departments, but they don't have that view across the silos. If you do, it's critical that you pick up the ball and run with it and make sure that everyone sees the problem that you're anticipating. You don't have to be right. You just have to warn folks that it's going to happen so that people can build it into their risk modeling. So if you see it, say it. That's the way that I would call it. Don't think about or worry too much about whose responsibility it is. You can take a seat at the table by flagging things, and folks may be like, yeah, we've got this, we understand, we're expecting it. That's great. But if they missed it, you've done everybody a favor.
Definitely. And I know there's a lot of additional considerations we've talked about in regards to capacity and things like that. What that are not necessarily in the team's control, right? What is included in that, and what do you foresee being part of those trends in 2024?
I'm going to go back to that see it, say it piece. I think that you've got to open your minds as to what next year is going to look like. The macroeconomic environment impacts are going to come all the way down to how your team recruits and where they spend their time. I'm going to say it now. It's possible your recruiters will not be as productive as they were previously. Even in that hyper-growth stage when there was all that competition for talent, I think that recruiters will be less productive. Here's why. I think passive candidates are going to resist moving role, right? They're going to stay where they are for stability. People don't want to be in a new job right now because of the first in, first out concept that we're seeing in so many of the layoffs. So sourcing is going to be so much harder as we start to pick up hiring. And then we can see from the Ashby trend reports that the application volumes are huge. And that's going to play a part in recruiter workload. That application volume is at an all-time high. There's a really heavy burden on recruiters. And that small amount of time you used to spend on resume screening, it's now going to add up over hundreds and thousands of applications. It's really going to impact productivity, and that impacts your capacity plan. You've got to look at modeling this, and you're not going to have the trend data to support it outside of the published trends like our trend reports.
Yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see how people set themselves up for success next year, and definitely taking a look at the trends reports from us and from others is really a big key to understanding what the market is like without maybe having to pull your own data, but sort of looking at the aggregate across the industry. So now we've done all the things, we've done our own capacity planning, we have gotten our resources in order, and we are ready to go back with a proposal on how we're going to attack headcount, what our plans will be, and continue negotiations. And it is a negotiation process, right?
Absolutely. So you may come up with your plan. That plan may not well be in alignment with all of the different execs and stakeholders that you have, but you're going to go back to finance and say, this is how I think we should attack this. Here are the things I've taken into consideration. Here are the risks that I've included to then mitigate. Here are the big shift changes from what the original plan or the plan that the executives wanted are, so that everyone has a view on this and get their take on it. And then you can go back and socialize with the executives. But it's key you come with an opinion. You are a stakeholder. You're a steward of your company.
On that note, and you have mentioned earlier about really, recruiting leaders, recruiting teams, having a seat at the table. What is so important about recruiting leaders getting their seat at the table amongst their peers in other departments?
First of all, having that seat at the table or not having that seat at the table creates significant gaps. And if we don't see everything that's happening, the entire process and the whole function of the company can suffer. Overhiring used to be a badge of honor. Overhiring now still causes the increased cash burn. It used to then, but people didn't focus on it. But you're responsible for that. You've got to have lots and lots of controls in places to avoid that cash burn. That's what your companies are going to be looking for you to do. Money's too expensive now. Organization imbalances. If you don't spot those cross-functional interdependencies and you go and hire a whole ton of customer services people, but you don't have the sales folks available to push the business into the company, that's an imbalance. That's cost. That's waste. And then two types of resourcing. You've either got insufficient resourcing because you haven't made the case to make sure that you've got the capacity to meet the business goals, or inefficient resourcing where you've got the peaks and the troughs and you're going to spike the activity instead of trying to smooth it out across the year. Those spikes cause diminishing returns for the business, and they also impact what your teams are capable of doing, which impacts quality of hire. It impacts representation. all of these are downstream impacts of this planning and you not having a seat. I've got an example of this. I worked on a civil engineering project a few years ago, and before the holes in the ground had been dug, all of the customer services people were in seat, but there weren't any customers. It cost millions of dollars to reset mistakes like that. And somebody with cross silo understanding or vision could have figured that out well in advance of the situation happening.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have a million more examples too over the years. I think one thing that's very positive now is that more recruiting teams, recruiting leaders are getting a seat at the table. More VPs of people and talent, such as yourself, have a talent background and can really give that full scope. So I don't know about you, Jim, but I feel very hopeful for the future of getting the seat at the table.
Me too. Even we talked about the cohort groups. Even number 5, where you're shrinking, that happened at Full Story, and because I was in the room for the conversation, I was able to reset the open headcount expectations. So where we halved the amount of open headcount, instead of just saying go hire what's open now up until this new number. So just said, let's take it all off the table. Let's reprioritize what folks want to hire right now, and let's drip feed that in and make sure that we're phasing it. We have an order of operations for that headcount. Because if it gets worse in the economy, and of course it did, all of that open headcount are folks that you then don't have to lay off because you've never spent the money. So that was an example of where I happened to have a seat at the table and the impact of that conversation. Go back and you can tell any of these stories, or even take this deck further forward, the call, and just make the case that you need to be there and you've got a different lens to other folks.
Are there any additional tips that from your experience you can share on how you've really successfully gotten this seat at the table?
Data is everything. That particular example, I was looking at the data. I was able to make a proposal that didn't fundamentally shift anything, but it's coming with an opinion and the data to back it up. All of a sudden, you get invited in. So instead of being a bit part in the business, all of a sudden you are there and you're seen as a trusted advisor. That's why I'm very thankful for having Ashby as the ATS and all of the analytics, of course, but I'm completely biased. But that key piece where you're able to show and storytell through data, that's the best way that you can get your seat at the table.
Agreed. Well, as we sort of wrap up here, just want to thank you all so much for being here and coming today. We know that it has been honestly quite the year in recruiting and for recruiters. And we really want to help our community give them the tools they need so that they can get their seat at the table and bring valuable insights. So thank you, Jim, for joining us. We will be sending out a follow-up email that has some resources, and we would, of course, love your feedback. If you enjoyed this webinar, feel free to give Ashby LinkedIn page a follow, sign up to get added to future events, there will be many more to come in 2024. And, we know as we head into the new year that where a lot of us are going to have to hit the ground running. So we hope you have a restful couple of weeks. If you have any questions, concerns, feedback on webinar topics that you would like to see that are relevant, you can always feel free to reach out to me directly, and we will see you next time.